কপাট ভেঙে ফেল কর রেলোপাট রক্ত জমাট শিকল পূজার পাষাণ বেদী ওরে ও তরুণ ঈশা বাজা তোর প্রলয় বিষাণ ধ্বংস নিশান প্রাচীর প্রাচীর বেদী ওরে ও তরুণ ঈশা বাজা তোর প্রলয় বিষাণ ধ্বংস নিশান প্রাচীর প্রাচীর বেদী তারা রইল কপাট ভেঙে ফেল কর রেলোপাট রক্ত জমাট শিকল পূজার পাষাণ বেদী গাজনের বাজনা বাজা কে মালিক এসে রাজা গাজনের বাজনা বাজা কে মালিক এসে রাজা সেদায় সাজা মুক্ত স্বাধীন সত্য পেরে সেদায় সাজা মুক্ত স্বাধীন সত্য পেরে আহা পায় যে হাসি ভগবান করবে ফাঁসি সর্বনাশী শিখায় রেখিন তথ্য কেড়ে হারা রইল ও কপাট ভেঙে ফেল কর রেলোপাট রক্ত জমাট শিকল পূজার ভাষার বেদী পাগলা ভোলা নেড়ে দে প্রলয় দোলা ওরে ও পাগলা ভোলা নেড়ে দে প্রলয় দোলা গারদ গুলা জোরসে ধরে হাসটা টানে গারদ গুলা জোরসে ধরে হাসটা টানে মাঝে হাত খায় দাঁড়ি হাত কাঁধে নে দুঙ্গুবি ডাক ডাক করে ডাক মৃত্যুকে ডাক জীবন মানে তারা রইল ও কপাট ভেঙে ফেল কর রেলোপাট রক্ত জমাট শিকল পূজার ভাষার বেদী নাচে ওই কাল বসে কি কাটাবি কাল বসে কি নাচে ওই কাল বসে কি কাটাবি কাল বসে কি ছেড়ে দেখি কিঙ্কারার ওই ভিত্তি নারী ছেড়ে দেখি কিঙ্কারার ওই ভিত্তি নারী লাঠিমার ভাঙলে পেলা যত সব বন্দিশালায় আগুন জ্বালা ফেলু পারি লাঠিমার ভাঙলে পেলা যত সব বন্দিশালায় আগুন জ্বালা ফেলু পারি কারার রইল কপাট ভেঙে ফেল কর রেলোপাট রক্ত জমাট শিকল পূজার ভাষার বেদী কারার রইল কপাট ভেঙে ফেল কর রেলোপাট রক্ত জমাট শিকল পূজার ভাষার বেদী ওরে ও তরুণ This is 9 minutes to 10 GMT on Saturday, the 8th of August 2020. This is an introduction to the national poet of Bangladesh, Qazi Nazrul Islam. This was a sample we played from a recording, and the details of the recording will be published in later editions, and we shall be publishing a series of recordings and readings, because this is the month of August in the calendar that we are following in this country, and the month of August is important for Nazrul Islam, and his actual passing took place in August, and so we shall be observing the month of August by updating the commentary and appreciation on Qazi Nazrul Islam. This is the national poet of Bangladesh, but this one, Karar Kopat, this one was especially significant because he was jailed by the British Raj for opposing the Raj. So this is Karar Kopat, the gate, the iron gate of the jail, the prison. So that is the one that he wrote, inspired by his experience, and that is absolutely relevant to the fight for freedom and independence and for genuine universal radicalization. Radical, moral, ethical, not radical with terrorism. This is radical with intellectual and moral height against injustice. So Nazrul Islam is the rebel poet, and he is the architect of the literature of independence and freedom, universal tolerance, and solidarity. So this is the beginning of our contribution, original contribution, of course, to the celebration of his role as an essayist, as a novelist, as a short story writer, as a freedom fighter of the universal definition and description, and the chronicler of the fight for freedom, freedom of expression, freedom for justice, and a lot more. So this recording that we played is a typical one, but it's not a recording that we have actually fully choreographed into the program. When we start programming on schedules, we shall be including properly choreographed renderings and performances of Nazrul's work. And we shall be putting in other contributors from the literatures of the world to freedom and liberation. Because of the military industrial complex and war machine, all these words have been distorted and perverted. And the fight for freedom that Nazrul epitomized, embodied in his work and his life, that fight has been distorted and put on one side and forgotten and suppressed. And the result is that we have got emptiness and lack of direction and lack of actual ideas and ideology. So the people are obsessed with darkness, and they are going deeper into darkness and forgetfulness of why human life is only worth human life if it is free, independent, and it is engaged in fight for justice, not based on ethnicity, not based on religion in the conventional sense, but on universal humanity. And that is the message that Qazi Nazrul Islam represents and gives, and is worth sharing with the whole world. And this is not the only one that we shall be sharing. Of course, we shall be sharing wider texts and wider contents of his writing and his contributions and his thoughts. And we shall be including other poets, other writers, other essayists, and other contributors from the times where and when they engaged in fight for justice and freedom and liberation anywhere in the world and everywhere in the world. And we are talking today about Nazrul Islam in memory of his work and in recognition and in tribute to him as the role model on so many levels for so many people. And this role model we shall be advocating in a consistent way that coherently represents the affinity with humanity, universality. And we shall be doing that throughout this month, and we shall be doing it beyond this month. There is another poet from the same language, Bangla language, that Nazrul wrote in, and his contribution will be fully incorporated in our programs. And his starting line is Shadinota Hinotai Ke Bachite Chai. This is the question, and this is the demand, and this is the cry for freedom, independence. And what is freedom and what is independence? Independence, freedom, liberation. These are words that are used but without any actual dedication, without any application, without any real relationship with the lives and the works and the agendas of the people who use them most of the times. And most of the times they use these words to actually score petty, careerist, personal, or narrow political points against one another or against their particular adversaries or rivals. But freedom is not about that. Liberation is not about that. Freedom and liberation is about what is being aimed for. And what is being aimed for is justice. Justice is not available when there is no freedom. And fairness is not available when there is no freedom. Equality is not available when there is no freedom. And the writers and thinkers and philosophers like Qazi Nazrul Islam are exceptional in that they rise above the particular narrowness and darkness and obsession with particular personal greed and personal advantage of the overwhelming majority of the people. And their task is to inspire people to get out of the darkness. And that is what we shall be actually advocating in most of the contents that we shall be broadcasting from the Khudilar television channel and also sharing on the Khudilar platforms on the internet. And today being Saturday, the 8th of August 2020, we're also remembering the battle that Nazrul fought for but did not live in the normal sense to actually experience because he fell ill when the British left in August 1947. And the calendar for the departure of the British is doubly distorted by having two dates. One is the 14th of August and one is the 15th of August. Despite all of that confusion, the real freedom and independence that was promised for both the 14th of August and 15th of August has eluded most people or hundreds of millions of people in the subcontinent. And the question is, why? What wasn't in place to deliver the promised freedom and the justice and access to fairness and dignity? The people that are featured in the British newspapers and the British media as threatening to invade this country, called migrants, include many people from the subcontinent, but not the majority perhaps in the current context. Whoever left their home or is leaving their home is not doing so because they want to leave their home, but they have no option. And one of the biggest inspirations or movers, impulses, inner kind of push and pressure inside is the lack of means, lack of food, lack of economic stability, economic justice and fairness, and the starvation, hunger, and famine. So this channel will be supporting the idea of having equality of access to food, and basic nutrition, basic health, basic housing in the people's own homes and homelands and home territories, home zones. And those cannot be available without political justice or a just or democratic or tolerant political system, which is what has been absent from the lives of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people since 14th and 15th of August 1947 in the context of the subcontinent. And the lessons that must be learned from what happened and what is happening and what has been happening to deprive people of the freedom that was promised in August 1947 is what we shall be looking at and examining. in light of what is happening today. Because what is happening today in India is absolutely outstandingly outrageous, because they are celebrating the destruction of a mosque that was built 400 years ago, and their celebration is inspired by total, complete hatred. It's not a celebration of anything positive, anything liberating, or related to freedom, universally defined. So the hatred being celebrated in a dishonest way, because the mosque, 400 years ago, the mosque was built, but there were other structures that were built 400 years ago alongside that mosque. And those structures are not being treated with the same contempt and hostility by the inciters and the traders of hatred in power in India today. Why? Because they're cowards and they don't have the courage to go and attack the economic foundation on which the Indian myth of Indian democracy stands. And the foundation includes the Taj Mahal. There is no name that compares with the Taj Mahal in the positive image of India. The same India that is celebrating the destruction of the mosque. And so therefore we have to show that this is not some kind of purist Hindu kind of tantric or mythical or mystic Hindu act. It is a hateful act, exploiting, abusing, misrepresenting the universal sides of the teachings of the Hindu religion, and it has been hijacked by the Brahmins and the haters. And they haven't got the courage, moral courage. If they were to attack the Taj Mahal, there would not be, India would be completely finished as we know it today. There would be nothing, absolutely nothing as an image for India that would compare for another 1,000 years with the Taj Mahal. So therefore, these people who are haters and controlling India are destroying India with hatred. And the legacy that Modi and other haters are leaving will be the legacy of destruction and absolute suppression of universal tolerance. And India is not the India that the chroniclers of Jawaharlal Nehru and his family in Britain and in the West have been boasting of and about. And they actually sided with Nehru and his clique and the suppressed Subhash Bose and the Indian National Army and whatever agenda Subhash Bose was actually advocating and representing. They painted him as a terrorist and as a bad person. Now, he was the opposite of bad person and terrorist. He was the freedom fighter and the advocate for freedom and independence and liberation that Nazrul actually wrote about and thought about and dreamt about when he wrote this Karar Kopat. This is the kind of universality, unity of a Muslim Nazrul under the political and liberation army leadership of a Hindu Subhash Bose. And Subhash Bose, while he was commenting on Nazrul, acknowledged Nazrul's part. And he said that he was a living person, he was a live person. Nazrul is Janto Manush. So this is the chronicle and the evidence of positive, universally liberating literature, thinking that the racists in charge of the history of the Raj do not want people to know about. And we have to remove, break that barrier of darkness and let light of independence and freedom in to the knowledge and the area of learning about what happened in the subcontinent in August 1947 and before, and what should have happened to the people of independent India and Pakistan and did not happen, and we have to take account of this. In Pakistan, there is a national poet, compared to the national poet of Bangladesh, who is Nazrul, there is a poet called Iqbal. Now, Iqbal was actually writing during the British still being in the subcontinent, and he wrote one of the international poems he wrote was actually contexted in and based on his identity or identifying himself as a what is called Hindustani, like wider India in the geographical historical sense. So he was speaking or writing or thinking as a Muslim, but he actually did that as a Muslim in Hindustan or in India or in Hind. The Hind, at the basis of the current Indian national anthem, connected with the writings of Rabindranath Tagore, the Hind, of course, was a different Hind because it included the parts that are now Pakistan and Bangladesh. But Hind, it was a greater area than what is now India and Hindustan. So Iqbal wrote as a Hindustani, not as a Hindu, but as a Hindustani in the geographical historical sense. And Iqbal was, of course, inspired by Persian poets. And one of those poets is Ghalib and others, but there was this international exchanges between and mixing and relationship among groups speaking various different languages, but these languages contain vocabularies that are shared between them and among them. So there is a lot of universality and exchanges that unite the people as human beings rather than divide or separate them. And the lessons that are contained in those realities and practices are right in front of us to actually observe and pause and take a break from the hostility and hatred and jealousy and narrowness and personal petty greed. For example, there is a Sufi singer or artist called Mamta Joshi. Now, Mamta Joshi is relatively young, and she has been featuring currently. She is one of the singers. She is a Sufi singer, but she also sings in other kind of genres, and she's a accomplished singer in Hindi and in Urdu and in other languages. And she's a Sufi singer, and she did an academic study and got a PhD in music. Now, she sings both Hindi and Urdu. No problem. And when she does either, you cannot tell that she is not an original speaker or singer of the language she is singing in. There's another one called Dr. Bose, Soma Bose. Soma Bose is a Bengali born person, but she does the same thing. She sings in Urdu, and she sings in Hindi, and she sings in many, many languages. And she is an accomplished, very noted, very powerful performer and artist. And she got a PhD, and her actual teacher is a Muslim, Ustad. Now, these show that when it comes to real art and real expressions, the differences based on language and religion in that way don't really count. And so we have to encourage the unity and the similarities as human beings among the people from the various backgrounds. So when Sama goes, sings the ghazal, which was actually made famous in an in a Pakistani film and written by Pakistani or Muslim writers and lyricists, you cannot tell that she is not herself a word quote a native speaker of the Urdu language in which the ghazal was written. And there are about 10 artists currently in August 2020 competing, if you like, for number one or top position as the best singer of that song. So that is one example of how the so-called political differences and other differences based on so-called religious differences are wrong because they don't address the human passion for natural liberation and freedom and entertainment and enlightenment. And these are facts that have been suppressed in the general propaganda pumped out of India by the BJP, the Brahmins, nationalist Indians, and by their counterparts in Pakistan, where there is no equivalent political movement compared to the BJP. But there are smaller forces that are at work, basing their politics mainly on religion, but capitalizing on the hatred part of it. So this is the big defeat for the people who claim to or promised in August 1947 to be delivering freedom and liberation and justice after the British left. Now, I'm not commenting or making the comments here to please the supporters of the empire then or the post facto supporters of the empire or imperialism now. What I'm saying is that the evidence of the behavior of the people who said they were campaigning for a better society after the British imperialists left, those people failed to deliver. Whatever the reasons are there, but those reasons are outweighed by their failure and their obligation to deliver. And I'm saying that that is the obligation that is absolutely paramount today, and it will remain paramount today throughout, not today just literally the calendar day today, but throughout the duration of these broadcasts from the Kudilar television channel and on our platforms online and elsewhere in real life outside in the ordinary walks of life. So the lyrics, the words, the contents of all these internationalist writers and thinkers and lyricists, as performed by the artists, I have named two, Mamta Joshi and Sama goes. These are only two. There are other people, including an English woman with a Swiss background called Tanya Wells, and there are others who have been vying for the top post. And there are two other Indians. One is Pooja Gaitonde and Avanti Patel. They are two singing the same song written by Muslim Pakistani. So some of the best performers and artists and singers in India are singing one poem written by a Pakistani. Now, what does it say? It says that the political hatred does not actually get through to people if the natural inclination and the natural preference for freedom and justice and beauty and attraction of thought are duly and properly and honestly and purely presented, which is what happens with the performance of Aaj Jaane Ki Zid Na Karo. And in Pakistan, there is an artist called Fariha Parvez. She has been praised for performing Jagjit Singh's two numbers from Jagjit Singh at a tribute a few years ago. And she has been compared with Jagjit Singh himself. Now, these are items of absolutely real life evidence that hatred and division is the wrong impulse and the wrong message. And whatever the differences by religion and religious custom and whatever, these differences are smaller than the factors that unite human beings of all backgrounds. And I'm talking about the human beings of Sikh, Hindu, and Muslim backgrounds in the context of the subcontinent and in the context of talking about August 1947. We shall be coming to diagnosing the promotion by the British media, like the BBC especially, but followed by others, of what they call partition in 1947. Partition, of course, is painful, absolutely painful, because it entailed any number of people being killed and murdered based on hatred. The kind of hatred that the BJP is trying to revive in India. And I say India because the evidence is that in Pakistan, for demographic factors, there has been nothing comparable to what India, as fronted and led by the BJP, has been doing. For example, in the eastern provinces, in Assam and other places, Modi has actually inaugurated a program of religion-based exclusion from entitlement to an inclusion in Indian political nationality. It is absolutely the same thing that the Burmese did to the Muslim Rohingyas, only the descriptions are different based on language used and terminologies used, but the actual effect, the actual agenda has been the same. And in the subcontinent of Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, since 1947, since August 1947, there has been no time, absolutely no time, no political turmoil, no political crisis caused by any of the leaders of the people in Pakistan and India until 1971, when the two countries became three countries with the emergence of Bangladesh. So the leaders in India or Pakistan, and since 71 up to now, the leaders have never, ever even considered raising the issue of independence from Britain in 1947. And that means that the impact of the freedom struggle against the British Raj and the lessons of the struggle under the Raj and under the occupation for 190 years have been completely lost. 190 years, that is nearly 200 years, and add the last 70 plus years. What is it, 73 years? So it is 100 and let's say 60 years plus. 160 years, sorry, 260 years with the submission to an occupation by the imperialist British power. And this is forgotten. And what is happening in Pakistan and in India and in Bangladesh are only describable at one level as internecine fights and battles within people of the same or similar backgrounds in terms of religion. In the case of Bangladesh and Pakistan, it's almost always the main religion, the Islamic faith. And the people who are fighting one another belong to the same faith overall. The number of the Shia faith is smaller. So it's the Sunni Muslims fighting other Sunni Muslims in Pakistan and in Bangladesh. In the case of India, of course, because of the caste and Brahmin domination, the religious demography is significantly different. But the power structure of the ruling Brahmin forces and the power structure compared to their counterparts in terms of political power in Bangladesh and Pakistan are also very different for the reasons that we shall come to later. But essentially, the effect of all of these dominations by these groups and the leaders has been to forget the promise of freedom and independence and justice. That is the point I am making and we shall be making, continuing to make. And this is an absolutely essential central feature of the contents of what we shall be broadcasting. And the idea is to establish freedom from famine, freedom from hunger, freedom from insecurity and injustice, and the access to food, shelter, and remedy in a fair society are the bedrocks, the foundations of any society and any decent society. Now, no decent society exists for hundreds of millions of people in the subcontinent. It exists for the small number who control the power and align with the ones controlling the power at the given time, but the majority have not got the freedom. So we shall be talking about this in the next part in a little while.